Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. Copper Gulch, Colorado. It's a small town, the kind where everyone supposedly knows everyone.
Right.
Close-knit.
Exactly. But then, right in the middle of that, a young woman, really bright, calculus at 11, college at 17, she's found murdered. Brutally.
And this isn't a movie plot. This is Candace Hiltz, a true story, and one just filled with, questions and whispers of corruption that still hang around.
Absolutely. Candace Hiltz. She wanted to be a lawyer, had this strong sense of justice. Her life changed quite a bit when she had her daughter, Paige, who had hydrocephalus, a serious condition.
So she's juggling a lot. Young mother dealing with significant health challenges for her child, but still holding on to those ambitions, and rooted in this small town.
And that's what this deep dive is about. We're looking at the source materials, the accounts of what happened, to try and unpack it all. Not just the crime itself, but why getting to the truth has been so difficult.
It really feels like there are layers here. What happened to Candace, and then this whole other layer of what happened after. Okay, so let's go back to what seems like a key moment, maybe the spark. The sources say Candace and her mom, Dolores, they actually witnessed something.
Yeah, they saw a sheriff's deputy taking an envelope from someone known locally as a meth cook. And Candace apparently immediately thought that's a bribe.
Right, not just suspicious, but straight up corruption in her eyes. Think about that for someone with her sense of right and wrong. Seeing that happen with law enforcement.
Must have been incredibly jarring. And the fallout seems almost immediate.
Yeah, that's the really chilling part. The sources say that same deputy shows up at their house shortly after.
And what's he do? He accuses Candace's brother, Jimmy, of burglaries.
It feels like retaliation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you saw something you shouldn't have, so now we come after your family.
It certainly looks that way. It's hard to see it as just coincidence happening so fast.
And Candace didn't just, shrink away.
Right.
The sources describe this confrontation. She apparently defended her mother and then called the deputy out directly.
She mentioned the envelope and the drug cook.
Yes. Point blank. Told him what she saw. Take some guts. The deputy apparently got angry and left, but that tension was definitely there.
Okay, so you have this confrontation. Then something else happens that feels ominous.
The family dog, Jackson, he disappears.
And this wasn't a dog that wandered off, right? He was a house dog.
Right. Stayed close. So him just vanishing, especially then, right after Candace stood up to the deputy, it's unsettling.
Was it just bad luck? Or was it, a warning? Sending a message? It adds this layer of creepiness to everything building up.
It really does. Looking back, it feels like a dark omen. This sense that things were escalating, that they'd angered someone powerful.
And then the absolute worst happens. Dolores goes out to run some errands.
She comes back home, finds the back door forced open.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And the scene inside.
Yeah.
Just horrific. Paige, Candace's little daughter, is crying. There's a trail of blood leading towards Candace's bedroom.
And that's where they find her.
Under the bed, rolled up in a green quilt. She'd been shot multiple times.
The source material mentions it looked like an execution. The brutality, the way she was hidden.
Yeah, it wasn't random. It felt targeted, deliberate, and they find a single shotgun shell in the living room. That's the immediate clue.
So, a horrific crime scene. And who gets called in to investigate?
The Fremont County Sheriff's Office,
Yeah.
the same department where that deputy worked, the one Candace accused.
Wow, okay. That immediately feels like a conflict of interest, doesn't it?
You'd think so. The lead investigators named in the sources are Detective Harry Sharp and, crucially, lead detective Robert Dodd. And Dolores, Candace's mom, she suspected them from the start, felt they weren't impartial.
And did they have a theory early on?
Almost instantly, it seems. Their focus landed squarely on Candace's brother, Jimmy.
Okay, tell us about Jimmy. What was his situation?
The sources paint him as pretty quiet, introverted. His father had died, and he apparently took it really hard, struggling with depression, kind of isolated himself, preferred being out in the wilderness, maybe a bit vulnerable.
So not someone you'd immediately picture committing such a violent act.
Well, that's what Dolores argued. But the police theory was stark. Jimmy, supposedly high on drugs, broke in, grabbed a stolen shotgun, and killed his sister in a rage.
But Dolores pushed back hard on that, right?
Absolutely. She said Jimmy loved Candace. There was no motive, no history of violence between them. And maybe, most importantly, she pointed out he had his own key.
Why would he break in if he had a key?
Exactly. It didn't add up for her. But it seems like the police had their narrative early on.
So despite the mother's objections and these inconsistencies, they launch a big search for Jimmy.
Yeah, a full-on manhunt. And during that search, they find something else.
Jackson, the dog.
Yeah. They find Jackson's body. And based on decomposition, it looked like he died around the time he first went missing, before Candace was killed.
Okay, how did the police interpret that?
Their theory adapted. Now, it was Jimmy killed the dog first, maybe to stop him barking or just to get access to the house somehow, then came back later to kill Candace.
But Dolores disagreed with that too.
Strongly. She insisted Jimmy loved that dog, would never hurt him. It just felt like the police were, fitting the pieces to match their suspect, rather than letting the evidence lead. Confirmation bias, maybe?
It certainly sounds like a possibility. So they eventually find Jimmy.
They do. Out in the woods. He's unarmed. And apparently he had no idea he was even wanted, let alone suspected of murdering his sister.
And the interrogation.
Described as pretty relentless. But Jimmy denied everything. The murder, the burglaries he was accused of earlier, he just kept saying he wasn't involved. And the physical evidence. Did they find anything connecting him to the scene?
That's the crucial part. According to the sources, nothing. No DNA, no fingerprints linking him to the murder scene. They never found the specific murder weapon. No blood on him or his belongings. A complete lack of physical proof.
So, lots of circumstantial suspicion, a police theory, but no hard evidence tying him to the actual killing.
Correct. And yet he was charged. Not with murder, ultimately, but with burglary.
The earlier accusations.
Seems so. But because of his mental state at the time, he was found unfit to stand trial.
So what happened to him?
He was committed to the Colorado Mental Health Institute. So, in a way, he's off the streets, maybe seen as handled by the system, but never actually tried for Candace's murder.
And the case just stalls.
Pretty much, it goes cold. For 7 years, according to the sources, no other real suspects emerge. Nothing significant happens in the investigation.
And during that time, another tragedy hits the family.
Yeah, really sadly, Candace's daughter, Paige, passed away. It was due to complications from her hydrocephalus. Just heartbreaking. Adds another layer of loss to this whole thing.
So years of silence, grief, and then suddenly something breaks. 10 years after the murder.
Completely out of the blue. A guy named Rick Ratzliff buys an abandoned storage unit at an auction in Canyon City. Standard stuff, usually.
But not this time. What did he find?
Get this. Inside the unit, there's an envelope clearly marked evidence.
Evidence from what?
Inside the envelope, a blood-stained axe and rope.
Whoa, okay. That's unexpected. In a random storage unit.
And it gets weirder. Also, in the unit is a box of old police uniforms. And one of them has a name tag, Dodd.
Dodd, Robert Dodd. The lead detective on Candace's case.
The very same. So now you have potential crime scene evidence, bloody axe, rope in the personal storage unit of the lead detective from the original investigation, years later.
That is deeply concerning.
Yeah.
What possible legitimate reason could there be for that? It screams mishandling, at the very least.
Exactly. It raises enormous questions about how evidence was handled, stored, tracked, or not tracked.
This discovery must have caused a stir.
Oh, yeah. Big time. It led to a lot of public pressure, people demanding answers, and one result was the official autopsy report was finally released to the public.
And did it confirm the original police theory about Jimmy and the shotgun?
Not even close. It completely blew that theory out of the water.
How so?
The autopsy showed Candace wasn't just killed with a shotgun. There were 3 different weapons used. Yes, a shotgun, like the shell they found, but also a .22 caliber rifle. She was shot 5 times in the back of the head with that, and a medium caliber handgun, a shot through the heart.
Okay, wait. 3 different guns. That changes everything.
Completely. It makes the idea of a single shooter, especially Jimmy acting alone in some impulsive rage, seem incredibly unlikely. It points to something potentially more planned, possibly involving multiple people.
A scenario the original investigation seems to have totally missed or ignored.
And yet, even with this autopsy report, the sources say the Fremont County Sheriff's Office was reluctant to really acknowledge this new evidence publicly.
Meanwhile, what's happening with Detective Dodd? The guy whose name was on the uniform in the storage unit.
Well, with all this heat, he moves to Texas. But the story doesn't end there. It takes another bizarre turn.
What now?
A landfill employee just doing their job finds stuff discarded in Dodd's trash. Not just regular trash.
Like what?
Things like a forensic light kit, evidence DVDs, an actual sheriff's office laptop. And maybe, worst of all, VHS tapes labeled sexual assault evidence.
No, you're kidding.
Not kidding. Including statements from child victims, even drawings they made, just discarded. In the trash.
That's beyond negligence. That's an unbelievable betrayal of trust, especially regarding those assault cases.
Yeah.
Dumping evidence.
It's shocking. And thankfully, the landfill employee turned it all over to the authorities, which eventually led to Robert Dodd being charged.
Finally. What happened at his trial?
Well, more disturbing details came out. It was revealed he'd edited the computer archive for the Hiltz murder case 6 different times.
He edited the case file.
Huh? And evidence from that storage locker, the one Ratzliff found, apparently pointed towards another person of interest in Candace's murder.
Yeah.
Someone unidentified.
But Dodd had that evidence.
Yes, and because of how he handled it, that potential lead was now essentially useless, compromised.
What was his defense for all this?
He basically argued the sheriff's office didn't have clear policies for handling evidence, sort of deflected responsibility onto the department's procedures or lack thereof.
And the verdict?
Guilty on 2 counts. Official misconduct and abuse of a public record.
Okay, so guilty. What was the sentence? Jail time.
No jail time. A fine of $1,000.
$1,000. For mishandling evidence in multiple cases, including a murder and child sexual assaults, editing case files.
That was the sentence, $1,000. Many observers call it, a slap on the wrist.
Understatement. Wow. So what happened to the sheriff's office after all this?
Well, the fallout was pretty significant internally. The sources mention 11 other officers were placed on administrative leave. The department's reputation took a massive hit, understandably.
But the main question, Candace's murder.
12 years after she was killed, officially it remains unsolved.
Unbelievable. After everything that came out. And what about Jimmy Hiltz, the brother?
He's still at the Colorado Mental Health Institute, but there's an interesting, maybe poignant detail in the sources. He now works there as a counselor.
Wow. From initial suspect committed to now helping others within that same system.
Yeah.
That's quite a turn.
It really is. And this whole story, Candace Hiltz's story, it feels like more than just one unsolved crime, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like a cautionary tale about how justice can be fragile, how power can potentially corrupt, or at least lead to massive errors and negligence.
It really underscores how vital impartial investigations are, the damage done when trust in law enforcement breaks down, and maybe the power of public pressure eventually bringing some of these things to light, even if not the final answer.
Absolutely. The impact of an unsolved case like this just ripples outwards for years. So thinking about everything we've just unpacked from the sources, what really stands out to you as you, the listener, process this? What questions are still circling in your mind about this very tragic, very tangled, and sadly still unresolved case?